Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor. Now, today we're back with Andy Whitehair, CEO of Autofinity, to discuss how dealers can alleviate pressure in a tough market and by having the right inventory strategy and thinking ahead, all those kinds of things. So, Andy joins me now. Hello, Andy.
Hi James, good to see you again.
Yeah, lovely to have you back on, Andy. Like I said in my little intro there, you're obviously not a stranger to Car Dealer Live. I think the last time we spoke was probably about a year ago,
Indeed.
and you were explaining the headwinds that were likely to affect dealers in 2023. Firstly, I mean, do you think, how good do you think your predictions were, and how do you think this year is going to differ from last year?
Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I mean, my predictions weren't mine alone. I think things that I was saying were reasonably foreseen by lots of the industry. Um, Somebody described last year to me as a game of three halves. um, the first half of the year, I think, surprised people. It was better than expected, and a lot of that comes down to pricing. And whether the used car prices particularly were sustained, which on the whole they were, but then things changed in the second half of the year. And in fact, that second half, which is why it was three halves, were uh, two tough changes that happened with consumer demand, the pressures of inflation, and used car prices actually starting to turn. Everybody talks a lot about EV prices. Obviously, those have continued to tumble, and that has been a difficult situation for any dealers that have to trade in EV these days, as it's shifting very quickly that way. But then more generally, car prices moving at the same time as new car started to shift, new car supply started to shift. So a very interesting year. And if there's anything we can say about this industry, the people in it are very adaptable and have to be.
Yeah, and I think some of those themes are going to continue to play out this year, aren't they? Obviously, consumer confidence is a huge factor, isn't it? Because of course, this year we've got the added excitement of a general election, which I know some people they question why that would affect the car market. Well, it's a big thing for consumers to be thinking about, isn't it? So there are some additional things potentially going to happen this year that could affect things again.
Indeed, yeah, and like you say, I've been in the industry. I'm a techie by trade, but I got into the automotive industry 30 odd years ago, and very quickly was educated that particularly the new car market is very sensitive to the economics of the country, and the economics of the country are affected by the politics of the country. So a general election, I think, will make some people nervous. That therefore can have an effect on new car sales, and it has a knock-on effect onto the used car sales. But I think what's been interesting is that the new car impact of COVID seems to be coming to an end. I'm certainly hearing from our customers that new car supply is now in a much better place. That causes its own challenges because I think manufacturers and dealers were doing very well on limited supply and good pricing. However, that's changed, and now there's more supply, and you're starting to see deals appearing that we haven't seen for a few years. However, the COVID impact on the used car market, we will be feeling for some years to come as the lack of new car supply
Yeah.
continues to constrain supply in the used side.
Yeah. I'll move on to the used market in a second. Just last sort of question about the new car market. Of course, this year, in difference to last year and previous years, dealers are going to have to be selling more electric vehicles. I mean, this is going to be a massive headache for dealers potentially this year. What do you think?
I think it's as everybody knows, every challenge has its opportunities. So this isn't going away. This isn't a 2023, 2024 thing. We are as a world transitioning to electric vehicles and zero emission vehicles, and it's that transition that is difficult to manage. But those that do it well will win. and those that stick their head in the sand and say, "I wish it would go away," will struggle. But undoubtedly, it's a very difficult situation when the market hasn't stabilized. There are literally hundreds of new models coming out this year from Chinese makers, and everybody's bringing out. Although a lot of the manufacturers have delayed their transition plans, and pricing hasn't stabilized because it won't stabilize until we're further down the road. So, yeah, difficult conditions, but the ones that do it well will win, and there are opportunities out there.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned earlier on that in the used market, we're still going to be seeing and feeling the effects of COVID for quite some time. Um, this year, do you think dealers are going to have added problems in terms of stocking cars? Is getting the right inventory and processing that stock do you think that's getting ever harder?
Getting the right inventory is always the challenge. The difference is how much choice you've got. And we've been through a period where there's been very little choice, and therefore it's been much more challenging for dealers. They've had to look at older cars. Everybody's had to look at older cars than they would normally have done, and a wider brand range. So not just being able to say, I'm going to just go and look for sub 3-year-old German cars or whatever it might be. They've had to change their strategies. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that has, again, made the industry more adaptable and made them recognize that there are opportunities out there in different types of cars and older cars, etc. But it's very difficult to turn particularly some of the big dealer groups. They've got thousands of cars, 50, 60, 70 outlets, hundreds of people. Trying to change that beast is difficult, and then having to pivot again when the market conditions change. So it's not easy for them, and that's why we're passionate about trying to provide systems that encapsulate process into them, so that they can have confidence that the processes that they want to apply, whether it be sourcing cars or pricing cars or marketing cars, are built into the system, so everybody's following the same rules. I was interested. I read this week that Mannheim was saying that supply and buying was actually buoyant. I think they were taken by surprise that in January how much activity there was around the physical auctions as well as online. So everybody's getting on with the job, looking for the cars. We are actually working on a module which we'll be releasing later this year, which will be a sourcing module within the VUB platform that is intended to try and help dealers to find the right cars and quickly assess them. It's not only a job, is it, of identifying the cars you want to buy, but being able to assess them from a price perspective. What should I be paying for this car? What's it worth? What's the margin likely to be? Taking into account that conditions might change while I'm trying to sell it.
Yes, and I was going to talk to you about that. In fact, how pricing used cars is always been a bit of a dark art, hasn't it? But there are so many tools out there now for dealers to use. I mean, data has never been so important, really, has it? And the dealers who potentially are making a success of things are the ones who have got their fingers on the pulse of market changes and data changing very quickly.
Indeed, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, James, but I've been lucky enough to work for businesses like Auto Trader and eBay, and that gives me a platform to stand on stage and talk to dealers about what I think they should be doing. And for many years, I was talking about digitization and the internet and implementing systems. Last year, we did some consultancy with some big dealer groups, and we looked at the applications that they had and the data flow across applications to identify friction and duplication and what's stopping vehicles moving through the process as quickly as possible. And what I realized doing that was that, in actual fact, dealer groups particularly have invested very heavily over the years in computer systems and data systems and applications. The problem they have now is seeing the wood for the trees.
Yes.
So it's joining everything up. That's what we're focused on, is the integration. How do I get everybody using common systems and make them usable, make them on a day-to-day basis, and not another overlay of another system that people don't end up using because they've got too much data, too many applications.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I know many dealers are very familiar with your VHub platform, but I mean, you're continually updating it. Of course, you are. But I mean, what updates can dealers expect this year from your platform?
So the exciting one we're doing at the moment is we are integrating with AT Connect, and that leads nicely back from the pricing comment you just made there.
Mm.
So the first integration that we'll be launching imminently next week probably will be synchronization of stock uploads, so that as soon as you put it into VI Hub, or as soon as you publish it from VI Hub, it's on Auto Trader instantaneously, and vice versa. That's a two-way feed, so that any changes made on Auto Trader will be reflected within VI Hub. So that's a significant step. The next phase, which we'll be working on in the next quarter, is to bring all the lovely, valuable pricing information and desirability information from Auto Trader into the hub as well, so that ultimately dealers won't have to use the Auto Trader system. They can just use the Auto Trader data directly in ours. So that takes away another pain. It's all seamlessly integrated. And then they've got the pricing and guidance directly in front of them, so that they can make quick decisions right down at a sales manager level, or in fact at a group level. So that's a big change we're excited about. We've also done a lot of work over the last 6 months around data descriptions
Yeah.
and cleansing data that comes into us from the likes of CAP, etc., and making that better to display through to the ultimate consumer. And a lot of that's around normalizing data, so that when you are searching for a car as a consumer, the choices you get are logical and simple, and not confusing. It's the usual case, isn't it? Of to create that simple front end, you've got to do a lot of work behind the scenes on the back end. So we've done that. And
Yeah.
then, as I mentioned, we'll be working on the sourcing module, which we're also very excited about. We've had lots of discovery conversations with dealers and dealer groups, and they seem very up for that, to make it easier. Where the concept is, you've got maybe the other change we haven't really talked about, James, is the sourcing market has changed over the years.
Mm.
So it used to be very much go to an auction and then buy a load of cars and then have them delivered. Now it's much more a virtual world, where you're either buying cars, some physically, some through the auction houses virtually, and then from the likes of CarWow and Motorway, where you're buying consumer cars virtually. That's very difficult to maintain and to control. So we're providing a tool to allow dealers to be able to see all of that stock out there, price it up, make a decision. We will be introducing AI elements into that as well at some stage, to help guide a dealer and say, based on historical information, this is what we think you should be looking at, so that ultimately they're getting down to very small numbers instead of having to trawl through thousands of cars.
Yeah. Now you make a very good point there, because I mean, we hear from a lot of dealers who are not quite buying stock blindly or unseen, but the initial sort of transaction is done blindly, and then they actually see the car physically, and it's not quite as it's described. I mean, it is quite a different landscape from how it was even a few years ago, when, like you say, you'd be in the auction halls, wouldn't you? And you'd be able to see the stuff that you were actually buying.
Yes, and when I mean, I think, don't want to put anybody's nose out of joint here, but I think We Buy Any Car sort of set the scene of mass buying of consumer cars, but then most of those cars then came into the dealer market via the auction houses. They were sold in then through BCA, who ultimately, of course, bought them. So it was the same sourcing for the trade. Now they're buying cars effectively directly from each consumer, and that makes it a much more tricky situation. Even just tracking it, what have we put offers on? What have we bought? Where is it? Has it been delivered? Are we supposed to collect it? All of that takes a lot of effort, and of course that's where speed to market fails because or is impacted because things go wrong. There's delays, there's friction in the market. People forget things because we're all human. So if you don't have systems and procedures to assist that, so every day we work on the basis that every day a car is not sold is costing around 67 to 70 pounds. So of course, if a car isn't even collected yet, if a car's not been assessed yet, if the car's not been prepped yet, if it's not been imaged, all of that is costing, 70 pounds a day, and that adds up when you've got thousands of cars. So tracking and having a central repository, which is what VI Hub's all around, a single view of the truth that will track the cars right from when they are acquired through to when they're sold, right down to the sales manager level, as I say, or provide a group level, is all about trying to identify what's holding up sales or marketing the car, so that you can take the delays out, improve days in stock. That can have a tremendous effect to profitability.
Yeah, yeah, because sometimes that can be sort of slightly overlooked, can't it? How many days in stock does a particular used car, what actually understanding why it's hanging around, and if you're able to understand that, that's just going to improve the process immeasurably, isn't it?
It is, and I think all dealer groups will have measurement of days in stock. Unfortunately, often it's historical. It's retrospective. At the end of February, they can look at what was my days in stock in February. That's a bit too late to do anything about it. So what we're trying to do is introduce systems where you can identify at a vehicle level, or summarized up to a group level or an outlet level. What's my days in stock today? What's my days in stock on that car? And then you can drill down and go, right, let me find the problem cars. Why is this outside of its parameters? What's going on? Why, it still amazes me in 2024, but it happens. People lose cars, they get parked, forgotten about.
Yeah.
So that, having systems that tracks all of this information, I think is critical. And as we just talked about, having it integrated with all the other systems,
Yeah.
so that you're not having to use lots of different systems and feed data. That's one of the biggest frictions that we find in dealer groups is manual entry. So entering details into one system, then having to take perhaps information out of one system and enter it into another system. All the manufacturers want you to use their systems. That adds another overlay for a multi-franchise dealer group. And we look to try and take all of that away. Because as we started off this discussion, when you've got enough to worry about around market conditions changing, consumer behavior changing, pricing changing, EVs, what you don't need is your staff having to multi-key information into multiple systems. It's just madness.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose that's one of the benefits which AI can bring, isn't it? Is simplifying that process.
Yeah, the AI things. I was talking about that yesterday. In fact, it's both scary and exciting. I think as we start to try and implement it into our systems, I think a lot of good can come from it, where suppliers can be building AI into applications to make decision making quicker and to provide guidance to our customer base that they just wouldn't been able to do previously. Where AI goes generally is a bit scary, but certainly from our perspective, we can see some very useful applications for AI that will provide a lot of benefit to dealers. In as we said about what should they be buying, where should they be buying from, what's going on within the dealer group, why are things happening as they are, how do they speed up and become more efficient? I think it was Robert Forrester was talking about shifting focus to sales per salesperson. So trying to change improve the efficiency of what you've got today, and not always looking to expand what you have.
Mm. Finally, Andy, and sort of in summary of what we've sort of been talking about, I mean, what are the things which dealers really, really should be paying attention to this year?
Well, EV, as we've said, the problem with EV, I think, is that they have to be reactive. I don't think it's very difficult to know how the market is going to pan out. So having the reason that I bang on about days in stock so much is the rules haven't changed in 100 years. You know, if you buy something and you've made a mistake, you need to know you've made that mistake and move out of it quickly. You can only do that if you've got the control and oversight of your business. So being able to adapt to changing market conditions means you have to have the oversight and insight of what's going on. But I think, yeah, the general election, as you said, is going to, and the new car situation is changing. It's not changing evenly either. So some manufacturers, I read the articles, and it makes it sound like everything's down, but in actual fact, some of our customers have said some brands are actually up and they've done very well. So yeah, I think I don't want to sound like a broken record, but having the basics in place in your business, having the control, the measurement, the integrations, removing friction will allow you to be able to move more nimbly as things pan out throughout the year.
Yeah. Fantastic. Always good to have a catch up, Andy. Thanks very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Always great. Thanks very much, James. Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye bye.